welcome to your Friday tutorial for Informatics 1. Do you mind closing those doors for me, please? The projector doesn't seem to be on, so I'm waiting for AVU to come and switch on the projector. But basically today we're going to be looking at structures and how to create these structures. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please fill in the attendance register. As soon as that is done, we can get started with today's tutorial. Okay, good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, I tried in the last 5 minutes to find a version of the code that is updated. I could not find one. So this is the version of the code that I have currently. It's quite old. I think it's 2 weeks old. Um, the newer version of this code is we basically transformed this to a 2D array setting with other arrays, right? You guys remember that? So I don't know where that is. I can't find it. So we are going to convert this from what it is currently to working with um, record structures. So basically, you guys at the moment, okay, record structures are not necessarily new. We've done them in theory. Today, we're going to be doing them in practice. So the idea behind them is we're trying to set up our own custom data type. Okay, so you guys know of string, integer, double, and in order for something to conform with that specific data type, it needs to be in a certain way. Each data type has its own characteristics, right? For instance, a string is a collection of characters. If it's not a collection of characters, it's an integer. If it's a number with a decimal value, it's a double. You guys know the characteristic difference between the three, right? Okay, so now we are going to try and create our own that is going to conform to a certain type of object, so to speak, right? In class, we did students. In order for someone to be a student, they need to have a student number, they need to have a surname, initials, all of that stuff. So you can basically just do with a record structure whatever it is that you want to do. So in this example, we were doing a vaccine drive, days of the vaccine drive, and the vaccine itself. Okay, so let's try and create that into, morph that into some sort of uh, data structure or in some sort of structure. What more would you like to know about the vaccines? In all the examples I've done so far, what we turned into a structure was the vaccines. So what more would you like to know about vaccines? So did every one of you in attendance online and in person, were you guys happy to get vaccinated? Okay, so some of you had your hesitancies, right? You don't need to raise your hand for that. But think about what caused your hesitance, your hesitancy. What was it? What was the idea behind you not, besides not trusting the government? What else was the reason behind it? So in the other classes, we looked at certain things. So let's say this program is still the same program. We still want to calculate how many people got vaccinated using which vaccine on what day, right? But let's get a little bit more information on the vaccine. So what we've come up with in the last two tutorials is ideally the name of the vaccine is important. So instead of just having vaccine type 1, 2, 3, we can actually give those vaccines names. Okay, we looked at other things like country of origin. Where does this vaccine come from? Okay, there are certain people who don't trust certain parts of the world. So if that vaccine comes from a certain country, you might not want it, you might want it. Yesterday, we looked at the efficacy. How good is that vaccine compared to others? Does it give you 70% immunity? Does it give you 90% immunity? What is the story there? We also wanted to know how many jabs does it take in order for you to be fully vaccinated, so to speak. So the less jabs, the better, ideally. Okay, so what would you guys want to know? Yeah.
What's the type of vaccine?
Okay, what do you mean by type?
So there's two different types of vaccines. There's the normal one where they inject you with the lesser form of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the mRNA version.
Okay. That's going to be difficult to quantify in terms of if there's only two types, then it's normal or other. So it's not really that much information. I don't know if you get what I mean. So we won't really have different. So if it comes to jabs, let's say for argument's sake, there is a vaccine where you need 5 jabs in total. So we can have variety over any amount of vaccines that we have. Okay, so I'm going to keep with those. We can do name, efficacy, and jabs, because that's what we did yesterday. So if we want to know that information about a vaccine, we can then create a record structure for that. So our record structure will be private structure, and I'm going to call it vaccine. So once again, I think I mentioned this in the past, there are differences between the way I code and the way Profilum codes. But overall, the answer is the same, or the end goal is the same. And that's something we want to get you guys to do as well, which is one of the reasons why we don't give out memos, because when we do that, you guys copy what we do instead of independently thinking for yourselves. So at this point, how I name my structures, and this is just a naming convention, at the end of the day, the structure is just another variable. You can name it whatever you want to name it, as long as you follow those naming rules, where it doesn't start with a number, there are no spaces, and so forth. So in the slides, you'll see the structures are usually called student rec, or whatever the name is, followed by REC. That's Profilum's way of identifying that it's a record structure with the REC. I use DT, and DT just stands for data type. So in this way, it's a vaccine data type. Okay, so inside my vaccine data type, I am going to define what a vaccine is according to my program, right? Public name as string, public as efficacy as double. I told the class yesterday, I just didn't bother checking. I don't think that's how you spell efficacy, but that's fine. That's how I'm going to spell it now. What else? Jabs. I think I chose these 3 specifically because it's string, double, and integer. We've got all of the normal, what's this? We've got all of the normal data types covered. And then from these 3, we still want to know what the point of this program is, which is how many people got vaccinated, right, with that specific vaccine. But now it's vaccine specific. So we can have variable called use per day as a, we can have it as an array, simply because we don't know how many days are going to be, this vaccine drive is going to be, number one. Even if we did, we can't define it in here. Anyone know why? Why can't we define a size in the definition of the structure? Yeah. It says 5 days. Let's say we know it's 5 days. So why can't I just put in 5 there? Besides the fact that this is an incomplete line of code. Why can't I just put in 5 in there? Yes. It has to be used by everyone. Okay, okay. It's a public thing, has to be used by everyone. You're on the right track, but not necessarily on the nose on that. Yeah. General form of the data type. Okay. Can I create this? Can I use this? Can I use the structure as is? Can I start by going into the button? Let's find a button, input, for instance, and I say, what is it called? Vaccine DT. Come on. Can I go Doesn't even like that. Can I do that? Oh, Visual Studio is not okay. It's complaining now. Can I do that? Why can't I do that? As well, it is there. I have private structure vaccine data type. So the people online say the structure is only a blueprint. Okay, which is what some of you were alluding to. So this I can't use as is. This is a blueprint. This is a map. This is an idea of what the structure needs to be. I cannot use it as it is. I need to create a variable of type record structure to realize it, to bring it to life. Okay, so because, as she mentioned, it is not necessarily because it's a public thing, but because it's a blueprint, it's a map, it needs to be accessible to everyone. So we can't necessarily give it a size because this is not the actual article of work. Do you get that? It's an idea of what the data type is going to be. So that's one reason. Another reason is Visual Studios will just simply won't let you. If I do that, kind of takes some time to complain, but it says arrays declared as structure members cannot be declared with an initial size. So that's basically its way of telling you this is not an actual thing. You can't do that. So even if we do know how big the size is, we always make it a dynamic array. Okay, we want to know how many people use this vaccine over a number of days. Maybe we want to know the total and the average. So basically, you can add as much stuff as you want to your record structure. I'm just keeping it that simple because we need to go through adding, we need to go through putting information in there in a couple of calculations, but you can make it as long as you want to. The idea is whatever information you put in there should be universal. Okay, so each and every vaccine should have what it is that you want, what it is that you are declaring within this record structure. Because at the end of the day, this record structure is going to be representing all vaccines. Okay, so think about something that could not match everything. I can't think of anything right now. Can you think of something that's specific to one type of vaccine that's not universal to the rest of them? Doesn't need to be just COVID vaccines, could be any type of vaccine. I don't know. Let's say for argument's sake, some of them didn't expire. So having like an expiry date in your record structure would mean that all of those that don't have a expiry date will be exempt from your record structure. So you need to make it as generic as possible in this instance. Yeah, age requirements. Okay, but I think all of them do have an age requirement. Yeah, all of them do. There are some that are only suited for 12 to 18-year-olds or 0 to 12-year-olds or whatever, but all of them do have an age restriction, so to speak. Okay, so there's our structure. Any questions on the structure? None. Cool. So after that, we need to realize the structure. So I'm going to go private vax, an array, because we don't know how many vaccines they're going to be, as vaccine data type. Good. Now, this is an actual thing. Vax is an actual variable, right? We can use it, we can manipulate it, we can do things with it. It realizes this structure, this abstract structure we cannot necessarily use. It makes it real by then creating a variable called vax as that type. Okay, so now I can actually go to vax and change a few variables in there, add things, delete things, and what's so. So after we do that, what else do we need? We need to know how many vaccines there are, right? In order to resize that array to a number. And V, we also need to know how many days they are in order to resize the innermost array. Both of those as integers. And so the last time, this information was not in our form load anymore. We created a separate button for it. Ah, it's crashed. Hello.
Hey.
Let me fix this quickly.
You should actually show them how to fix that, so that they know how to fix it in future if they have that problem.
Yeah, but I don't think the way I fix it is the like official way of fixing it.
Oh.
So basically what I do is I remove all reference to it and try and go back. This is the best way I know how. Get rid of that. See, I have no, that's not it. Just that.
You've got quite a lot.
Yeah, I need to find all of them. See, I've got two forms already that broke on me. I mean, two grids already that broke on me.
Okay, but isn't this from Tuesday's tutorial?
Yes, this is from. What? There are no buttons here. I should just start it over.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if this happens to you in the semester test, we suggest that the easiest is actually to start over.
Yeah.
But for that reason, we suggest to you do the following. When you create your project, drag all your controls onto your form, do everything, set your UJ grid, everything up correctly, right, from the get-go. And then save and keep a backup copy of that in case anything goes wrong. And then when you write your code, please just make sure you don't do any fancy save as elsewhere. Save everything and save religiously on your backup copy. So you've got a spare copy sitting on the side, and then you've got your spare copy, you're working off the backup copy and making changes to it, because you can't afford to waste time redoing your user interface.
Yeah, because this is not fun.
What did you do, dude?
I don't know.
Okay.
It just... Oh, the thing is, this is Tuesday the 28th one.
Why are you being lazy?
March. So no, the idea is I'm constantly changing it. So this one just got to a point where I've changed too much at this point, and it's not working that great.
The online people are laughing at us bickering.
Okay, I'm just gonna close it. Don't save, just close. Okay, let's try open it again.
But you did all this on your own laptop, right?
Yeah, I had an issue with the UJ grid initially, but now here's the kicker. The issue is, so I'm basically pulling it from OneDrive, which is why I think it's like create a new folder. It's not a great way of doing it. Create a new folder, go to tutorials. No, not tutorials. And copy it from here and paste it onto my desktop. Where is it? Tuesday the 20th. Copy.
Okay, well, while Mr. Levier is going through this and trying to recover the rest of his program, we just thought it would be helpful to tell you what we have planned in store for you for the rest of the semester in terms of practicals. Ideally, what we want to do is we want to give you past papers. So for the next practical, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, we are going to give you a semester test, a second semester test or exam from the module Informatics 100. Now, Informatics 100 is basically Informatics 1A, but taken by the chartered accountants. So they're not the real programmers, so they have a watered down version of what we expect you to do for your semester test. All right. And so their version of the exam is like a simplified version of what we want you to do. So that's the stepping stone to what we eventually want you to do for your semester 10. So for the next practical, we want to give you one of these practicals. It involves record structures, but it only involves one record structure with an array inside. Afterwards, we want to take it, we want to bring up the notch one, up a bit to what we want you, the real programmers, to be capable of doing, and that is a record structure inside another record structure. And you're like, oh, is that going to be difficult? No, it's not really, but you've got to be able to visualize the different dimensions, because if you've got one record structure inside another record structure, then how does that work?
Yeah, I had commented out the wrong stuff. It's still not great, but there's a grid.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so Informatics 100 is Informatics 1A light, so to speak. So if you can do that, you should be okay with the stuff that we expect the accountants to do, but it's still a watered down version, but it's still a start. If you can do that, then you are well on your way to understanding what we want you to do. Properties, change the name.
And then please don't be put off by the fact that it's a record structure inside another record structure. You could, in theory, once you figure out the record structure, you could do a record structure inside a record structure inside another record structure inside another record structure, like a Russian doll.
Those are pretty fun to play with. So test. You see how long this takes? Imagine if you had to do this in a test or exam. What would I do without you? What? Okay, let's see if this works. Crossing fingers. But I don't think the running of it was a problem. The problem is the form. Okay, it's over here. It's working great. Let's see if the form still appears. Yes. Let's see if my copied record structure is still there. No, it's not. Okay, so I'll have to redo the structure again. So we had name as string, public. Is that how you spell efficacy? I'm good at something. Double. And we had jabs. Wanted to know how many people got vaccinated. An array as integer. I wanted to know the total. And I wanted to know the average. Good. So after that, what we did is I had a little comment there to show the new from the old. And we need a variable that's going to realize the structure. Vaccine data type, we need to know how many vaccines and how many days. I think this is where we were, right? Yeah. And I needed to add a new button because all of that input was, the initialization was done in the form load. So now we can't do that anymore because we don't know how many vaccines and how many days they are. So rename that from
The other thing we should point out is that it's okay if you spell things wrong in your form. It's okay. We're not the grammar police.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, so it's fine. We accept that sometimes you're going to spell things wrong and it's okay. But what we do have an issue with is if you have buttons where your captions are cut off. So in other words, you have a very long description on your button, but your button's so small that we just see the beginnings of an instruction, but we don't know what the rest of the button says. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're not going to be the grammar police when it comes to spelling. We're okay with it. We only have an issue if your design is not great and it confuses people. Remember, we are both pretty much marking all your semester tests. You do want us to be able to understand what it is you're trying to do with your program. Right. Another thing is, depending on how many spaces we have in the venue, we might actually be required to set 2 different papers, possibly. So if you are sitting there and you're thinking that your friend or the stranger sitting 2 seats away from you has this code and you go, oh, okay, and then you try and copy their code, chances are you're going to be in for a big surprise. We've had situations like that before, where we're looking at this person's code and like, but this has got nothing to do with your project.
Yeah, one's about, so obviously the stories are going to be different, and we don't want you writing about eggs while we're asking you about cats. Okay, so at this point, we do have our initialization button. We went through this last week, why we need this. We've got our number of getting how many vaccines they are and getting how many days they are. So if this was the 2D array implementation, we would be resizing all of those arrays. At the moment, we only have 2. We have vaccines and we have used per day. Vaccines is going to ideally be resized to the number of vaccines that we have. So I could simply, after finding out how many, I could redim vax to number of vaccines. So now we know how many vaccines they are, right? From there, I need to redim the innermost array. So that's resized the number of days because we want to know for vaccine 1, day 1, day 2, all of those days. So if I said,
do that redim.
If I say redim vax, and that was redim to nv dot used per day, that is nd. Good. Are we all happy?
You're happy. You're no issues. Online people, you have any issues with that? We've done what we need to do. We've resized the number of vaccines. We've also resized the number of days for our vaccines.
So at this point, you should know Prof. Lung's emphasis means there's something weird happening here. Yes. You don't understand what I just did. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. We're looking at line 41 to 44. Okay, so if we scroll back up, let me minimize this because we know what that is. I'm not using any of these, but I'm not, okay, let me just comment them out. No, I should leave them because if I comment them out, I can't run the code. Let me just move my structure to the bottom there. It's closer to the code. That's where my structure starts. So this is essentially where my code starts, right? So you understand that we have vax as a array that realizes the structure we just made. So because vax is of type vaccine data type, it has the following attribute. It has a name, efficacy, jabs, used, all of that, right? But the point that I'm trying to make here is it's an array. You can see the fact that it's an array. So what do we generally need to do with arrays before we use them? We need to resize them, right? And vax is going to be each and every vaccine we're going to be using. So what are we going to resize it to? The number of vaccines that the user is going to give us, right? Which is what we did in line 44. Do you get that? So line 43, I'm asking how many vaccines are we working with? The user will give me whatever value, put it inside NB. Then I'm going to say, as soon as I have enough information to resize my grid, I'm going to do it. I mean, to resize my array, I'm going to do it. Then, after I get number of vaccines, I have enough information to resize vax array, and I'm resizing that array. So do you understand that part? Okay, so we also have another array in here, which is used per day, which is inside vax. That you get as well. We need to resize that array as well, right? Which is why after getting the number of days, I am resizing within vax dot used per day resized to the number of days.
Okay, so the question we want to get to is, are you okay with this? Are you on board? Do you agree that we've resized our arrays? So we have all our arrays and we've resized them all. Okay, so we've got a hand up.
Line 45, yes. Line 45, this is 45. 46, yeah. Not all the days.
Yeah, because we have to repeat that line of code according to how many number of vaccines we have.
Okay, so what? Give me the code and I'll write it.
Okay, no, you know what? Before you do that, I think this is really important. I'm glad you picked it up. Okay, online people, did anyone pick it up?
I think there's one person who says we need a loop,
yeah,
but I'm not sure if they know why.
Okay, right. So what I would like you to do is, before we actually do this for loop, okay, Mr. Labia, could you perhaps run the program and show what will happen if we do this? I suppose before
well, at this point we can't.
Yeah, you won't be able to.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah, because we do want to do that. So
yeah.
maybe let's just.
We can just leave it and continue.
No, let's not run it yet. Let's write out the rest of the code quickly, at least up to input.
Yeah.
And then the reason why we want to show you this is because this is one of the common mistakes. I think this is the most common mistake that we see students do. And this is basically, I would say, the number one reason why students fail the second semester test.
So let's assume, as Prof said, let's assume this is correct, and let's run our code and see what it looks like. At this point, there's no way of seeing that that is an error, and that's one of the issues that comes with this type of error. And let's initialize how many vaccines, 4 vaccines, how many days, 5 days. So that still works. We still have vaccine 1, 2, 3. No, I said how many vaccines? I said 4.
Wait, go back.
Some dodgy is happening here. Oh, I know what. I know what's happening. It's 1 to 4, so that should be day 1 to ND, and that's 1 to 3. That should be 1 to NV. That was the issue I had when I changed this code. So again, please remember, save every. So the rule for saving is either save every 15 minutes. Or save when you are done any piece of code that you would then want to test. That way, if something does go wrong, you've saved a majority of it. So 4 vaccines, 5 days. There you go. That's weird. Why?
I think your code is wonky.
It's not wonky. Rows, number of days, 1 plus 3. That's fine. Columns, number of vaccines, 1 to 3. That's fine.
Is it?
Oh, this is where it's wonky.
Okay, you fixed size, yeah, okay.
Yes, this is where it's wonky. NB plus. This is
note,
why you shouldn't do this. This is just too much work.
Now, on this note, please realize that you can't just take, the idea is really don't study for the second semester test. Please don't study the code concerning fixed size anything, okay? If you work with single variables, you know those exercises, that was just so that you understand, to get you to understand and appreciate arrays. Please don't study those practicals for your second semester test, because it's very disheartening when we mark it and then we see that you use single variables in your semester test.
And this is basically how we're going to mark it, right? We're going to run your code. We're going to put in our own test data. When weird stuff like this happens, now it's up to us to go and figure out what did you do wrong. And that requires us more time and makes us more grumpy. I'll speak for myself. Makes me very grumpy. Okay, there we go. 4 vaccines, 5 days. It is working. Our input, we haven't started with our input yet. It's still input for the single variable, but I just wanted to check if everything I've done so far works. So we do have students who insist on writing out the whole program, right? Because they just know what they're doing and run it at the end. It's not a very smart move because a lot of things are going to break in a lot of places and you're not going to know what's breaking. So for initialization, initialize your code, run it, see is it working. If it's not working, fix it and then move on. But if you write everything and it starts crashing, it's just going to be a nightmare. You're basically going to be doing what I'm doing now, trying to figure out from code you've written 2 hours ago what's breaking. Okay, so let's get to input because this works. I will minimize that just so that we have enough space. So when it comes to input, we still want to get all of the input for the vaccine information, right? So we're going to go through each and every vaccine. And what does that mean? What do we need in order to loop through all our vaccines?
So let's put it this way. We want to ask you, what is the name of vaccine 1? What is the name of vaccine 2? What is the name of vaccine 3? And so on, right? So we're going to have to go through every single vaccine and say, hey, look, let's say you all produce your own vaccines, right? So go, hello, you're the manufacturer for vaccine 1. What is the name of the vaccine? And then what else do we need?
Efficacy.
What is the efficacy of your vaccine? How many jabs are required?
And that's basically,
you know, and then we go, all right, for day 1, how many vaccines?
This is how many people use
After
your
we
vaccine.
do all that, we're not going to work on the total and average because that's calculated out. I mean, have you ever had a program where you asked the user, listen, okay, let's think grade 12. Grade 12 report. We go, you, grade 12, what was your name? What's your name? What's your ID number? What is your mark for your first subject, second mark, third mark, fourth, fifth, sixth mark? And then go, okay, what's your average? Why do we need to ask you what your average is? Does that make sense? Can't the program work it out? And that's another common mistake people make. So they go, oh, look, here's a record structure. It's asking for total and average as well. We're going to ask the user for the total and average. Does that make sense? No. Okay. So you only ask up to input, which is basically the first 4 here. Now, after I'm done with you, vaccine 1, I'm going to move on to the next vaccine manufacturer. So vaccine manufacturer number 2, and I'm going to ask the exact same question. Then I'm going to ask manufacturer number 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to go through everyone. How do we... So you agree we're doing the same thing over and over again, right? So what do we need to do in order for us to be able to repeat that action of asking the same questions over and over again? What do you know? What are the 2 different types of ways in which we can get people to repeat code? You use a?
For loop.
Okay, and the other one is obviously a while loop, but you're not going to use a while loop in this example because we know exactly how many times we're going to run this. That's we start at 1 and we end at however many number of vaccines there are. So that's why we use a for loop. Does this make sense? Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go for, since we're working with vaccines, I'm going to call my variable v, for v as integer equal 1 to number of vaccines. Next vaccine.
Does this make sense? So we're going through every single vaccine, not every single day. Does it make sense for us to go for every single day? For every vaccine? No. Okay, because we're talking about vaccines. If there are 10 vaccines here, we want to do it for 1, 2, 3, up to 10 vaccines. If there were 5 days, we're not going to go, oh, there's 10 vaccines, but we're going to do it for 5 days.
Okay, so what information do we want to get for each vaccine? So what's the input? Name, right? So we need to go through each vaccine's name. So our variable for storing the vaccines is vax. So I'm going to say vax at v. So v is basically going to count how many. So v is going to be, in this case, since we start at 1, it's going to say vaccine 1, right? What do we want from vaccine? What do we want to know from vaccine 1? We want to know what's the name of vaccine 1. So vax v dot name is equal to, and input box.
While Mr. Libia is going through this, quick question. What will happen if I use C string in front of the input box? Will the program stop running? Will it be okay? Well, we've got people shaking their head, but like, why? Okay, let's put it this way. Will the program crash if I put C string there? No, it'll be okay, right? But will your two markers like it? No, not that either. Why not? Tell us why we shouldn't like it. Because it's a string already, right? If it's a string, then we don't need to C string it.
But Visual Studio is happy with that.
We're not happy with it.
Okay, so basically what we're trying to say is this shows that you don't fully understand what's happening. You are turning something that's already a string into a string. It's a very useless piece of code. And usually Visual Studios will, it has a different color blue to it. I don't know if you can see that. So let's go on to the next one, and maybe we'll see the difference in the colors. So we've gotten the name. We need the efficacy, which is a double. So we have vex at v dot efficacy is equal to, this one is a double, so cdbl input box
And please note that we're not expecting you to do all the fancy indication of which vaccine it is. It makes it easier for us to read, definitely. But if you're struggling with trying to concatenate your strings so that it forms this, because you're struggling with the brackets and so on, then rather leave it alone.
Okay, do you see the color difference between string and double? Okay, that's Visual Studio's light way of saying what you are doing in line 71 is stupid. Okay, so don't convert something that's already a string into a string. The actual one is a little lighter blue. Well, if you're doing this redundant conversion, it makes it a little bit darker. Okay, let's remove that.
I think the other question you should ask yourself is, if you're busy typing this code and you realize that you go back to v dot name, and then it goes, what are you talking about? So it goes, I don't know what name you're talking about. I don't know what efficacy you're talking about. What went wrong? Does anyone know what may have gone wrong?
So let me try this. Giving away the answer, but if now the third one we need is jabs, so I'll say vex at v dot jabs equal to, it's most probably complaining because I'm not done with the code. Jabs is an integer, so see int, let's just input box how many jabs, question mark. At this point, if I hover over it, it says at the bottom there, Tuesday tutorial 0328. This just shows how long ago this tutorial was created. Jabs is not accessible in the context because it is private. So luckily, if you have an IDE in front of you and you know how to hover over stuff and read, you should have a clear understanding of what's going on. But what is the reason for this? Let's ask someone else.
Yeah, you know, you're like just answering the questions. Oh, let other people answer.
Anyone else? Except the two of you. Yes. Sorry? Yeah? It's not part of the? It is, here it is. Okay, so what does that change? It doesn't fall under? It doesn't fall under the structure, but it's defined in the structure. There's another hand somewhere. Yeah. Okay, there's a comment online that says it's not global anymore. So basically, once you make it private, it's only accessible between lines 24 and 31. And this is a common mistake that a lot of students make. In this instance, it's easy to pick up because everything else is public. It's the only private one. Okay, we have, remember, your structure is one of the first things you're going to do when you start coding your semester test and your exam, okay? Besides maybe your option statements. But after typing it out and everything is private, you might not realize that there's an issue there. And when you start trying to access those members, it won't let you access them. And this is the part where it's just the first 15 minutes we've allowed you to start coding. And some of you, for some reason, which is brings me to this point, if you have never coded on the lab computers before, because you have a very strong computer at home or you enjoy your own keyboard or whatever the fact may be, please try coding at least once on the lab computers, because those are the computers that you're going to be writing your semester test on. You need to be familiar with those computers. Where we get students who never coded on the lab computers going, your computer is broken and it's not allowing me to do this, or your version of Visual Studios, this and that. We basically just come over your shoulder and look at that and go, this is not the computer. You're just doing weird stuff here. And I had this with yesterday's class as well. We ran into some errors. Most probably we'll run into those errors today as well. And we had some students who have never seen those errors before. There's nothing more terrifying than having to sit in a test or exam and run into an error for the first time there. So whenever you're doing your practicals, try and break your code as much as you can. Try make weird and wonderful mistakes, move things around and see. You're going to run into issues. Obviously, your code is going to crash. That's the whole point. But if it crashes and gives you an error, like right now, the issue we're having here, let's say for argument's sake, Visual Studios was not as straightforward as it is here to say, I can't reach this because it's private. Some of the errors are quite cryptic, to go index out of range, null reference exceptions. But if you've seen that error before and you've dealt with it, do you know what caused it and how to recover from it? Chances are yes, because you've seen it before, right? If this is the first time you run into this error in a test, have you seen it before? No. Do you know how to recover from it? No. And that adds on to anxiety as well, because this is something new and you're not supposed to be having new experiences in a test or exam scenario. Okay, so let's fix this and I'll give Prof a chance to maybe elaborate on that, if you will.
The other thing you should realize is that it did actually give a squiggly problem and underline it for you when you made it private. So Visual Studio now, especially with 2022, really goes out of its way to try and make programming as easy as possible. And in a way, it's bad for you because it doesn't really give you the opportunity to learn the mistakes on your own. But on the other hand, it's really offering you a lot of support to tell you, hey, we think this might not be correct. So don't ignore the warning signs that the IDE gives you. You know, it's there for a reason. Read it.
So we've got an online student who unfortunately has left, and they said any D lab. Yes, just any lab on campus, but every Friday we do have a practical session, right? You get to sit there for an hour and a half while getting marked. And that time I've seen people look up at the ceiling almost as if there's something interesting happening there. That time is allocated so that you get to start your program, right? Not only that, you've got a whole host of brilliant minds that are marking you. When those people are done marking, their job is to walk around and assist you in understanding the question and answering the question as well. I've seen some of them sit with students for 20, 30 minutes on end after marking just to explain certain concepts to students, which is why I don't understand how students on a Thursday afternoon are going to be on Discord asking me what a 2D array is. I'm just like, but on Friday, you were one of the first people to leave the venue after getting marked. So use that time, use those labs. Chances are you're going to write in those same labs as well. And not only does it give you an idea of how the lab scenario works, you also get a feel of how fast or slow those computers are to know exactly how you need to leverage your time. Okay, so now we've got name, efficacy, and jab. Is there anything else we need? Code is gone. Is there anything else we need as far as inputs are concerned?
In other words, what else do you need to ask the user to provide you?
So look at the record structure. What else do we need? Yeah. Used per day. Okay, so we have an integer.
Input box.
I always forget to write input box.
Yeah, this is another common mistake people make, by the way. They go see int and then they forget to put in input box. What happens if you leave out the input box and you just go see int how many? What will happen? Besides the obvious answer, which is it will crash. Why will it crash? By the way, what we're doing here is called pair programming, which you don't get to do until you're in third year. Or maybe second semester, second year?
Yeah, I think so. No, but don't they have?
You've got your team project. Oh yeah, they have the team
They
project.
have a team project in first year. Yeah.
Okay.
So later on, like second semester, right? Yeah, there's something weird happening with my code. See, this is the part in the test exam where Visual Studios is definitely broken because it's saying integer cannot be converted into an integer. That is so weird.
Can anyone help us?
And to prove that it says it's redundant, remember the error we made with string where we said name convert to string was a darker shade of blue? My cint currently at line 75 is the same darker shade of blue. So it's basically saying what you're doing is redundant. You can't convert an integer into an integer. Yeah. It's a dynamic array. Okay. Is everyone with him? It's a dynamic array. Cool. Okay, so it needs brackets.
Yay, fits.
There we go. So do we need anything else? We've got the name, efficacy, we've got the jabs, we've got used per day.
Oh, we've got a hand there.
Yeah. Why? That seems like so much work. My code is, Visual Studio is not complaining. Okay, but you realize there's a problem here. Okay. Anyone else realize there's a problem here?
Okay, on a scale of 1 to 1 to 5, 1 to 5, where 1 is like not a serious problem, 5 serious problem. How would you rank this? Let's see show of hands.
Who says 1?
Who says 1? Yeah.
I'm for 1. I'm in that camp where I say if Visual Studios is okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, there's a 2 there.
We've got a 2, so no one's for 1. I'm alone in this camp. Okay, 2.
Oh, there's a person here who says 2, so there's another 2 there. Okay, 3.
4. Okay, so it's bad, but it's not bad.
Oh.
5. Yeah, Prof. Lang just likes being the opposite because I said 1. If I had said 5, she's going to be on the opposite. I'm still behind 1. Okay, all of those 5s. If it's so bad, what's the issue? Yes. It will crash. Okay, at the moment it's going to crash anyway because we still have that error on top. Okay, so what I'm going to do to actually get to a point where we see this, I'm going to comment that line out because that's the one that's causing a lot of controversy, right? So let's only ask name, efficacy, and jabs. And let's run it. Then we'll come back to why that's an issue. So initialize, I'm going to do 2, not 12, 2 and 3 so that I don't have too much information to put in. So far, so good. We're all happy, right? Input. What is the name of vaccine 1? I'm going to call it V1.
By the way, you don't have to come up with fancy names for your test data, right?
What is the efficacy percentage? This is 99.9%. How many jabs? Just a single jab. What is the name of vaccine 2? V2. Efficacy 70%. How many jabs? 3 jabs. Okay. So nothing happened.
Why not? Why did nothing happen?
I was sure it would crash, but it didn't. Yes. Okay. Okay, yes, we haven't displayed. That's an important point. But we were all sure it was going to break because of this. Some of you guys were like, we need for loops. And I told you, if Visual Studio is happy with it, like, why would it crash?
Okay, so the question we really want to ask at this point is, why hasn't it crashed? Can anyone tell us why hasn't it crashed? Because I'm not telling you now, you can believe me more important than him.
I think it didn't crash because I'm an awesome coder, personally.
All right, and I'm not telling you there is a problem with it. Obviously, it won't crash at this point, but why hasn't it crashed at this point? Let's look at that line 47, okay? What is the purpose of that line of code? It's meant to resize what? It's meant to resize the use per day array, right? Now we go down to our code. Have we written code that we execute that involves that array yet? No. So if it hasn't executed that code, can you understand why it won't crash? Okay, so can we perhaps comment the code so that we can actually use that line of code and see what happens?
But if I uncomment it, then it crashes, then my code gets kept at 40.
But that's the whole point. We're trying to figure out why it won't crash.
Okay, so bring this back. So now it's kind of like a double whammy. It's going to crash because of 2 issues. But let's try that again. But I still do have some faith in my code. Who's with me? Who believes that we are going to make it to the other side? At least I've got some people in my camp.
Online people? Online people don't have an opinion.
No. So 2 and 3, once more. Input. What is the name of vaccine 1? V1. What is the efficacy? 98%. How many jabs? A single jab. How many people got vaccinated? You guys thought that line wouldn't run. 66 people.
See, the minute we start using the use per day array, it crashes because back up there in line 47, we didn't resize that array correctly. That's why it's crashing for now. Okay, so think about that single line back on line 47. Okay, now we all established that we actually do need a for loop to go and wrap itself around that single line of resizing vax then v to use per day. And why is that? Because if we take a look at that single line of code, line 47, how many times are we resizing the use per day array? How many times are we doing it? We're only doing it once, aren't we? Because if we need to do it multiple times, then we will put it in a for loop or a while loop, for loop most likely. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, how many times do we need to resize that use per day array? How many arrays are there? How many use per day arrays are there really? Isn't it just one? Or is there more? There's more. How many? Isn't it dependent on how many vaccines we have? Do you remember in class we mentioned the example? We said if each student has an array, then each student must have their own array for their marks. The same thing is happening here. Vaccine 1, you have your own track of how many vaccines were used per day. Vaccine 2, you have your own array. Does this make sense? So if that is the case, line 47 cannot be a single line of code. It needs to be wrapped inside a for next loop, which ensures we do it for however many number of vaccines there are. Okay, so let's do that. Online people, any comments?
Before we get there, this is the error that I had yesterday with the Thursday Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back online, but that's about as good as it gets. We still have no way of sharing. Connection is really low.
Okay, maybe they can hear. If they can hear us, then they can just let us know in the chat.
Okay, the power's back up. Okay, yes, you can hear us. So we will not be able to carry on with class, unfortunately, because of load shedding happened. We encourage you guys to watch. So this is addressing both online and in person people. We encourage you guys to go watch the tutorial videos from yesterday and or Tuesdays. And if you have any questions on there, you can ask the assistants. Alternatively, you can ask the Saturday tutor, but we can try and pick it up next week, Friday. That's if this whole load shedding business is sorted, and maybe getting the projector to be on the generator. But for now, we do apologize. And yeah, it's out of our control, unfortunately.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do is we just want to summarize the most important points we would like you to establish when you watch the videos.
So the most important points is, let me just look at the code. Oh, it's still
Well,
on
the
the second
first thing
screen.
is we need to make sure you all understand that you've got to be able to resize. When you're resizing an array inside another array, which is effectively what's happening here, you need to use a for next loop. So you start off with the outermost array and you say, oh, there are so many vaccines. That is a single line of code. But then the very next thing you need to do is you need to use a for loop that goes exactly for the number of vaccines, which is the same as the size of the array you just resized. So you say there are 10 vaccines, so then you know your for loop has to go 10 times. And then inside that for loop, you need to resize the array that's inside every single vaccine record structure. So that's the number one thing you need to do. The second thing you need to address is what Mr. Lebier insists is not an issue, and that is that line of code where he says, well, if I'm going to read in how many vaccinations were used per day, he simply needs to use V twice. Once for the V is going to be used for the vaccine, but he's also going to use V as an index for the number of days, which hopefully you all realize is a completely bad idea, because the array for the number of days must be controlled by a for loop that is number of days. Does that make sense? Not number of vaccines. Number of vaccines is for number of vaccines. Number of days is for use per day. So there's got to be a second for loop inside your input code.
Yeah, and once again, reiteration, if you know the errors and you know what they mean, it's easy to recover from them. So the one that we have currently says, object reference not set to an instance of an object. Sure, all of you have come across that error before. Okay, if you haven't, you need to tweak around your code to get it. But basically, it just means you have an array that is not resized to the right amount, and you're trying to add information in there. So maybe, for instance, you may have not resized your array at all, which is the situation here. If you're trying to access parts of an array that are not there, you're going to get an index out of bounds exception. So you just need to familiarize yourself with these with these errors. Rather have them now, go to the assistants and have them help you fix it, because on the day of the test and exam, both Prof. Lung, myself, and the assistants know less about programming than you do. Okay, so when you raise your hand and go, this is weird, I go, yeah, it's very weird. That's pretty much all I can do to assist you. So just like semester test 1, the things that we can do is help you understand the question. So for instance, if there's a word in there that you don't understand or a sentence, we can break that down for you. But if you go, look, my code is not working, I'll be like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's working. That's as far as my help can go. And one of the reasons why we emphasized multiple times in the first block about creating the right Visual Studio a solution, about getting the right versions, is 2 years ago, I think 3 years ago, we had a student that sat there in our venue and created a C# solution and sat there for 2 hours, not knowing, going, where is the form? I don't know where your form is. Eventually, Prof. Lung got soft and she showed her how to fix it. I was just going to write it out for the whole 3 hours. Okay, so make sure you know what you're doing. Advice that Prof. Lung actually gave to one of the students, which I gave to the class on Thursday, is we are eventually going to upload a lot of past papers. The idea would be, don't download last year's paper. Okay, keep both of last year's papers, don't download them. Download the earlier papers, work through them, right? When you get to a point where you feel you are comfortable enough to answer a semester test question, then you download last year's paper. Reserve 3 hours in your day, uninterrupted, where you're going to sit down, download this paper and see it for the first time, right? Almost as if a semester test scenario. Download it, start your stopwatch, first 20 minutes, do the design and see if you are capable of finishing that paper in those 3 hours. That's the best type of practice you'll have. By the time you get to the semester test and actually write it, you've done this before. Ideally, we're going to ask you the same things. The question isn't going to be the same, don't get me wrong. But at this point, you know you're going to have a record structure within a record structure, right? You know you're going to have to generate some input. You know you're going to have to do some sort of calculation, some sort of total average percentage. That's pretty much your paper. You know you might have to do some min and max calculation.
No, you have to, definitely.
Yeah. So that's basically, there's nothing more we can ask you besides that. So record structure, within record structure, input, calculation, min and max. The only thing that's going to change is the scenario in which you have to answer those questions. So try and do the past papers. We will upload, as we said today, your practical for next week is going to be a semester test from Informatics 100, which is a lighter version of this. Then next week onwards, each and every week, we'll give you a past paper or an exam. Okay, I think that's as much talking as we can do without showing you anything or actually teaching you stuff. So we shall see you guys this afternoon. Please do watch Tuesday and Thursday's tutorial, just to be up to speed with everyone else. And then I guess on Saturday you can ask the tutor. And if you have any questions as well, feel free to send me a DM on Discord, and then I'll see what I can do about it. Yes, Keo Maraba, your hand is up. When are we getting the lecture slides from? Okay, we will upload those after class. They are available. We just maybe have not uploaded them yet, but we will upload them.
Okay. Thank you, online people.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.